From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Library of Congress. I'm John Cole. I'm the director of the Center for the Book in the Library of Congress, which is the library's reading promotion arm. We operate nationally through affiliate state centers for the book, which help honor authors and writers in every state, plus the DC, and our most recent affiliate is in the Virgin Islands, I'm happy to note. We also have a major role to play in the National Book Festival each year. The festival this year is going to be September the 25th. We hope you will mark that date on your calendar. But here at the Library of Congress, one of the best ways that we promote books and reading is to have Books and Beyond talks, which are noontime talks. We're glad you're here for this one. Each book we feature has to have some kind of special connection to the Library of Congress, and boy, does this one have connections. You're going to hear from the people, most of the people who worked on the book. You're going to learn a great deal about the Library of Congress's resources. And of course, what's wonderful about an overall resource book such as this one is that it draws on all of the Library of Congress's collections. And by the time we're done today, we're going to know a lot about the resources of the Library of Congress for the nation's pastime. We are filming this presentation for later broadcast on the Library of Congress's website. That's why I would like you to turn off all things electronic. The Center for the Book also now has a Books and Beyond Facebook, so we are promoting our presentations, past, present, and future, on a Facebook page. There's information about this and also about the future programs in this series in a handout which we will soon have at the back of the table. To begin, I'm going to introduce Harry Katz, who is one of the chief people responsible for this book. You're going to meet several others. Harry is a former curator here at the Library of Congress in the Prints and Photographs division. He also is a consultant on other parts of the library, other exhibits, other programs, but today we're staying right with baseball, and Harry is wearing his Boston Red Sox cap, and he will introduce the program. Let's give Harry Katz a hand. Harry?
I didn't hear any outright hissing, so that was a good, it's a good sign. No Yankees fans in the audience? Well, we do. It is an auspicious day. The Nats had a big win yesterday, so we'll give the local team a big shout out. Yeah. No, it's a brand new season, and we're all pretty much in the same place right now. So it's a great time, and I want to thank John Cole and Center for the Book for having us all here. You know, this book started right here in this building. You know, I'm former curator here in the Prints and Photographs division, but I keep turning up because it's hard to break away from the material that's here and from the people, and that's where it starts, with the collections and the staff here. This was a team effort, and really I knew about some of the baseball material that was here. I had worked with Michel here on a web project earlier. I had worked with my co-author Frank Ceresi on an earlier acquisitions project, and because of those earlier projects, I knew there was great material here, and Phil and Frank were colleagues of mine, had shared passion and interest in baseball. So why not do a baseball book from the Library of Congress? And what we found is astonishing. But a lot of you who are on staff here know and won't be surprised at what we find here. You work with it every day. So I want to thank everybody who helped out with this, because so much of it is from the folks who work here in P&P and geography and map. There are great treasures buried here. And so one of the great opportunities was to bring it out into a book. Helena Zinkum and Ralph Eubanks, everybody was great in helping to put this together, but particularly at the player level, my teammates, Phil, Michel, and Frank, and then Wilson McBee, who did some great writing early on, and Susan Reyburn, who came on to help edit and add her own contributions. It's interesting when you think about the team effort that goes into baseball and what goes into doing a baseball book. Susan came on sort of halfway through, and there's one great section on sheet music. And you know, when I get feedback on a book, everybody says, "Oh, I love that sheet music." And that section on the sheet music, it's very pictorial, very historical, and you know, that's Susan's section. And so each of us brought our own take on all this material. You put it out on the table. And that's sort of what I had in mind when I did that book. I just didn't know it. So with a project like this, we all brought our own perspective, and that was the wonderful thing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my co-authors, and first among them, we'll start with Susan. Thank you.
Okay, this really was a team effort, and it was a 2.5-year team effort. I was fortunate to be able to come in relief about halfway through. And the biggest challenge that all of us had, no matter what part of the project we were working on, was selecting images. We have an embarrassment of riches here at the Library of Congress. And we were only allowed about 350 images. Well, what do you do when you've got hundreds of thousands to choose from? That's where it got really creative. So today we're going to share with you a lot of items from the collection from throughout the library, going back to the late 18th century, which might be a surprise to people who thought baseball started in 1839. We've got proof that it was being played here 50 years before that, and that proof is in the rare books section. But first, let's go back to where we should start. The ceiling of the Jefferson Building. I don't know if all of you have noticed this. You will probably want to take a visit now if you haven't, to the mezzanine level of the Jefferson, where we have a number of murals depicting the Olympic ideal in wrestling, running, discus, and then for an American touch, we have baseball and football. So we made a point of including this as a double-page spread in our book. Okay, a look at manuscripts and rare books. Okay, our earliest reference to baseball here at the library, and it's probably the earliest known reference to baseball in America anywhere, the Diary of John Ray Smith, 1786. He's at the College of New Jersey that's now Princeton, and he makes a note on the 22nd of March, a fine day, play baseball in the campus, but am beaten, for I miss both catching and hitting the ball. Okay, the earliest printed reference to baseball in the United States comes in 1787, but actually this is a reprint of a book that was done by John Newbery in England in 1744. But you can see they're already using the term baseball, and from the image you can see that the players are in the positions we would expect them to be in, although those bases are rather deadly looking, those posts. Baseball on Boston Common, 1834, and as bucolic and pastoral and as nice as this is, the players had to share the field with cows up until about 1850, when cattle were finally banned from the park. Okay, there were two competing styles of the game for the most part, the Massachusetts game and the New York game. And the Massachusetts game, as you can see, with a rectangle, 4 bases, and 13 players on a side. And the feature that I like best about it, and I wish that we continued to have it, is that a fielder could get a man out by throwing the ball directly at the player as he ran between the bases. That was called a stinger. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. The New York game, of course, has the familiar diamond. And one of the reasons that I suppose the New York game won out was the popularity of the game was such at the Elysian Fields that the New York press covered it extensively. And even though town ball in Massachusetts continued to be played throughout the 19th century, the rest of the country adopted the New York game with the diamond. Okay, this is the first newspaper coverage, or it was newspaper coverage of the first intercollegiate baseball game, Williams and Amherst, and it was an interesting double bill. It was a baseball game and a chess match, muscle and mind. And Amherst defeats Williams 73-32, so you were there for the long haul. Okay, one of the great things about the rare books collection is that we've got a lot of early rule books for various sports. Haney's was a classic, Henry Chadwick. Chadwick is credited with developing the modern box score, and he was an ardent proponent of the game, spent a lot of time traveling around the country promoting the game, so we have him to thank. Items that you would have seen in Haney's book include a lot of catalog advertisements, Peck and Snyder, and a couple of other firms that advertised, let me go back there, that also advertised, were eventually bought out by Spalding, which, as you know, is still in existence today. This is a children's reading book in which you've got a way to learn the alphabet through the different rules of using the different letters of baseball. F stands for foul, on which Arthur goes out. G stands for go, how the merry boys shout. And the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. Not so visual, but also important in manuscripts, we have the Branch Rickey papers, and this includes his scouting report for 18-year-old Don Drysdale, a future Hall of Famer for the Dodgers. And not everything, he covers things other than just his baseball ability. He mentions the boy had a high scholastic record, almost a straight A. From the Jackie Robinson papers, there's a variety of items that show just what a stressful time the man had as integrating baseball. A number of interesting telegrams. He got death threats, but he also got things that are a little more uplifting. Just saw you steal home on TV. Great, from a 50-year-old deep South white man. I say you are the finest and a gentleman. Beat the Yankees. Okay, cartoons and comics. Here's an early one for baseball that includes Abraham Lincoln. And this was during the 1860 presidential race. And you'll notice that each of the candidates there is holding a bat. Lincoln is stepping on home base. There are a number of puns. I'll only read you the ones that are coming out of Lincoln's mouth. Gentlemen, if any of you should ever take a hand in another match at this game, remember that you must have a good bat and strike a fair ball to make a clean score and a home run. Okay, the Pittsburgh Pirates. On their treasure ship, they've got John McGraw walking the plank. He was the manager for the New York Giants. And Frank Chance, who was a member of the Chicago Cubs, his head is bobbing around there in the water. And you've got Honus Wagner in the top right, hanging next to the pennant, clinging to the pennant there. We've got some wonderful original cartoons in the Art Wood collection. These aren't just cartoons as they ran in the papers. This is the original artwork that came in. And a variety of comic books going back. We've got 1948 with Joe DiMaggio, To the Kid Who Struck Out Superman. Performing arts, this was a wonderful place to find things that were unexpected. Of course, we know about the sheet music, because music is a part of the ballpark experience with the organ and everything. But during the Tin Pan Alley era, baseball music was everywhere. There were about 80 baseball songs a year being written and produced. And women actually were very involved. Here you can see Nellie Nichols. Women were often on the cover of baseball sheet music. This is the issue or the cover for Take Me Out to the Ball Game that was sent in for copyright deposit. You can see the stamp up there. Some of these are lesser known gems. I Can't Get to First Base with You, supposedly written by Lou Gehrig's wife with Fred Fisher, who was a well-known old hand on Tin Pan Alley. Gehrig claimed he liked the song, but if you read the lyrics, it's pretty hard to believe. It begins with, "I've sacrificed and bunted my heart." Then we get a little later on in the 20th century, Meet the Mets, and on the cover of introducing the new Los Angeles or Anaheim Angels, California Angels, you've got their space age-like stadium. We've even got the original opera manuscript and notes by William Schumann for the Mighty Casey, and you can see the draft of his song, Peanuts, Popcorn, Soda, Cracker Jacks. And the opera is actually still performed to this day. It seems to be popular with summer stock. I went to the Virden and Fosse collection because I was aware of Gwen Virden's appearance in, or her Tony Award-winning turn in Damn Yankees, and we found a couple of great things. We found the original posters, and then an outtake that was from her Sports Illustrated photo shoot when the musical first came out. Wealth of material in MBRS. This is the first earliest known existing film of baseball, 1898. Over a period of 3 days in Newark, Edison's manufacturing company spent filming the game. They filmed entirely from behind first base, so your field of vision is rather limited, and all you see are runners coming up the first base line. But the 60-second film actually was something of a wonder to audiences back then. Only about 30 seconds of it survived today, and you can see it on our website in its entirety. His Last Game, this is a notable film that you can find on DVD. It's the first time that baseball appears in a film as a scenario, that is, as a film with an actual plot as opposed to just highlights. And it's not in the least politically correct. It was done very cheap. If you take a look at the players, you can see the fellows on the left there. They've got their team names taped over the original baseball jerseys that they've borrowed. So you've got Gumtown and Choctaw taped to their chests. They obviously spared some expense on making this film. Speedy, this is Harold Lloyd's last silent film with a very extensive cameo from Babe Ruth. And Harold Lloyd stars as a taxi driver who, in his excitement about picking up Babe Ruth, races through Manhattan traffic and continues to turn over his shoulder to talk to Babe, who is horrified. And it's a wonderful segment, and Babe had a great time doing it. He appeared in a number of feature films, actually, and he did a pretty good job. Here's a lobby card from the Jackie Robinson story. Jackie Robinson played himself. It took 3 weeks to do the film. They spent their time filming just before spring training. And considering that Jackie Robinson was not an actor, he's okay. He's okay in this movie. You might recognize the fellow on the ground. Ronald Reagan, starring as Grover Cleveland Alexander, and Doris Day plays his wife. We've got some wonderful documentaries. This is Little League, which emphasized the importance of dads volunteering as coaches and moms volunteering for logistics and organization. Another wonderful documentary, it's about 9 minutes long, The Kalamazoo Clouders. This was about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And it was on seeing some of these early documentaries that the son of one of the players went ahead, made his own documentary called A League of Their Own, and that, of course, led to the movie by Penny Marshall that we all know from 1992. Now, Jimmy Fox, who you see here, was a major league manager. One of the stars of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was Dorothy Schroeder. She was blonde. She was a fabulous player. She was their cover girl. She was the person that they wanted to put out there. And they were the models for Tom Hanks and Gina Davis in the feature film. Okay, next we're going to go to baseball cards. And to talk about that is Frank Ceresi. And Frank is a local baseball historian with incredible expertise in the 19th century. He also evaluates and appraises baseball and other sports memorabilia for Sotheby's and other places. And he was the fellow that we turned to for all of our technical expertise. And here's Frank Ceresi.
Can I have you stay up here because I can't see the thing. I'll just tell you in the back. Hello, everybody. Now, I was the one author who has never worked here, but I've lived in this area my whole life, and I can tell you, every one of you is so fortunate to work here at the Library of Congress. It was a dream come true, and I want to thank Harry and everyone else for including me in this project because it was fabulous. The journey kind of started, let me just kind of digress for a second, a few years ago when Phil and Harry and I saw the, at least a little bit of the largest baseball collection in the world when we went to Wisconsin. And I have always loved baseball cards and baseball history and thought it was a fantastic idea that we could dig into the stacks and, as Harry said, see some of the great treasures. And we just barely scratched the surface. So maybe there will be a part 2, I don't know. But it was great fun. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the baseball cards, and there's so many others that we could have picked for the book, but baseball cards, of course, are dear to so many of us because they are collectibles still today, even the old ones. The first one that's right in the book is the Champions of America. This actually, the Brooklyn Atlantics from 1865, this was the first baseball card. And it's kind of neat that it really appears because this is 4 years before there was even anything resembling professional baseball. Professional baseball meaning when players were all salaried, the teams were all salaried. And in 1865, the Brooklyn Atlantics, they were the team. They won the championship right before the Civil War in 1861. They won it again in 1864 and in 1865. And the cool thing about this image and this card is that it was actually given to spectators at what the New York Clipper said was the first championship of baseball in the world, and that's in 1865. I can go on, and I won't too much, but I want to point out there's a couple of very interesting people here. There's one player, Dickie Pierce, who was really the first shortstop, and he kind of defined the position, and somebody else by the name of Sid Smith, who was a Confederate soldier, almost lost his legs, but instead learned the game of baseball during the Civil War and became a catcher. 2 years later, he played here with the Washington Nationals, by the way. So that's pretty cool. Boy, I tell you, great treasures. I think it was Phil who called me to say that we had, or he had, uncovered some of these old Judge team sheets. Now, I have seen a lot in the wonderful world of baseball collectibles because I did consignments for Sotheby's for a number of years, but I have never seen old Judge uncut sheets. Old Judge baseball cards, that was kind of, as Harry said in the book, the first wave of baseball cards. And it's kind of interesting from an American culture perspective because what was happening, obviously, was tobacco companies, they got it. They knew that in order to sell their product, they may as well put some of these players who were, by 1887, quite popular, put them on the packs of cards or at least put those cards in the little pack and they're going to sell that product. And in fact, that's what happened. By the way, right here that's Connie Mack. You guys know Connie Mack. His grandson was a senator up until recently. Connie Mack played for Washington in 1885, 1886, and 1887. He was their catcher. And in fact, he was the first catcher to crowd the plate right before Connie Mack. Catchers would actually take the pitch on a bounce. But he was one who got up to the plate, and as probably most of you know, or some of you know, he owned, managed, and did everything for the Philadelphia Athletics until 1955. So he was a player in 1885 in this town, ended up dying as owner of the Philadelphia Athletics in 1955. Okay, another interesting guy in the Old Judge cigarettes, that's Billy Sunday. Billy Sunday was a pretty good player for the Chicago White Stockings. Now, this is before the American League. There was only the National League by 1887, so he actually played in the National League. But Sunday was played for the White Stockings and discovered by Cap Ince, and it's kind of cool here because we also show that where he really gained his fame. By 1915, you see up there, Billy Sunday delivering a sermon. He was probably one of the top 10 most popular Americans in the first two decades of the 20th century. He turned into an evangelical minister, and he drew great, huge crowds all over the United States. He was a big one for the Prohibition too, so I don't get it, but. Okay, more cards. The California, the one on the left, that's Hess Creole cigarettes. Again, it's a cigarette pack. They put in these PCL cards. That's the Pacific Coast League. That was the first regional baseball card set that came out in 1888. The middle card showing Seton from Seattle. He played in the Northwest League, and that brings us to about 1910, which really kind of leads into the significance of that third card, which is Walter Johnson. Some of you know Walter Johnson. If you've been here forever like I have, some of you may even have remembered some of his descendants. They still live here. Walter Johnson was the most acclaimed baseball player in Washington history. He was probably one of the top 2 or 3 pitchers of all time. In fact, in 2000, when Sporting News picked their 100 most influential athletes of the 20th century, he came in 5th place. So he was a great hero here, but it shows really what Harry called, and rightfully, the second wave of baseball cards, and that was about 1909, 1910, 1911, when the T206s came out. T206 is the designation for that card. They're called white borders, very popular set. Today, people still collect them, at least some people. They're very, very expensive, very rare, although probably the rarest of these 3 cards is the Hess card. There's probably only about 1,000 of those cards, not sets, the cards themselves in the world. But the Johnson card and the T206, that's where the Hannes Wagner card came. Do you guys know about Hannes Wagner and his card? The last Hannes Wagner card that traded in the marketplace was sold for $2.8 million. And no, the library doesn't have one. At least we haven't found one yet, and I'm hoping we find one. So this is my favorite set, T3s, Turkey Reds. They're unbelievable. They came out in 1911, and 1910 and 1911 is when they finally came out. You can see they're beautiful. Now, you can also see they're about 8 by 10, so obviously they would not fit into a tobacco card pouch, and they didn't. This is a very early premium, meaning that people would put about 10 coupons from these, send off to the American Tobacco Company, and get these beautiful cards. But they're wonderful, and we've got some here at the LOC. The T202, this is a great set, still very collectible. From your left, you see Huey Jennings, a great manager. On your right, you see Ty Cobb. And these are tobacco, they were in tobacco packs. Right in the middle, you see 2 players. And the 2 players are Ty Cobb sliding into third and Jimmy Austin. And what's, I think, fascinating about this set and very interesting is that those pictures, those images from the middle were taken by Charles Conlon. Charles Conlon, along with Paul Thompson, are the 2 greatest baseball photographers ever. And that picture of Ty Cobb sliding into third base, he was known as a fierce, fierce ball player. If it came out today, probably would have won a Pulitzer Prize. But this is a great set and a wonderful card. Paul Thompson, I just mentioned. The T205 cousin is the T206 set. Instead of remember I said the other ones were white bordered. This is gold bordered. They're gold leaf, in fact, meaning any of them that exist today are very hard to find in the kind of condition that you see here at the Library of Congress because the gold leaf chips. But Paul Thompson took the photograph. You could see the photograph on the right, and the photograph became the basis for this great T205 set. Tinkers to Evers to Chance. Now they came out in 1909. That was 1 year after that famous poem, Tinkers to Evers to Chance. Poor Chicago Cubs. Are there Chicago Cub fans here? Okay, yeah, there's 1 or 2. Don't be embarrassed about it. They're a great team, but they won their last championship right when those cards kind of came out, 1908. So anyway, and here we're now up to when people like me collected in high school. This is a great card that was gifted by a person here in this room who will remain nameless, but it's a great card because it's got Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, and Willie Mays. What's wrong with that? So I guess that's it for the cards.
Okay, we're going to move to Princeton Photographs, which was an absolute treasure trove. And Phil Michel, who's in Princeton Photographs, oversees a database of 1.2 million images. He was our photo guy.
So what I'll do, this is really just a very visual book, so I'm going to throw you a lot of visuals at you and let you enjoy the pictures, and I'll jump in here and there to tell you a little more about what we were selecting from. The great challenge and joy of this book with the team was trying to tell a lot of stories at once. We wanted to show the richness of the collections. We wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of baseball and really how it was threaded throughout culture in America. It was growing up, so I hope you get a flavor of that as you look through the book. But what we organized the images for this presentation is a little bit different, so you'll notice some different trends as you look at the collections as a whole, not just as individual pictures. This first print is just absolutely beautiful, and I'm glad you're able to see it really large here because the original print is actually very large, and it shows Union prisoners in North Carolina playing the game with their protectors and guards surrounding them. And already that early, or around the Civil War, you see the diamond has already taken shape and it looks familiar. And fans are crowding as close as they can to see the action, and you'll notice that theme repeating throughout. This is another print from the collections at Princeton Photographs Division. This is a very, very large poster celebrating the Chicago U.S. champions. These would have been the White Sox at the time, I believe. Is that right, Frank?
White stockings.
White stockings, not socks yet. They were stockings. With a very unorthodox batting holding of the bat. As we teach our little leaguers today, you get those hands together. This print is one of about, I think, 100 panoramic photographs showing baseball. And I really love this for several reasons. One is you get some actual game action showing here. That's a very hard thing to depict in early photography. Now, if those of you who are baseball fans will notice there's something unusual going on here. The pitcher is in mid-motion with his pitch, but the batter seems the least bit interested in trying to hit the ball. Well, why is that? Panoramic photographs, by and large, are taken by literally panning a scene. So when this photograph was taken, the photographer had a camera that was sweeping across the scene. So when the pitcher was releasing his pitch, that part of the negative was being exposed, but by the time the camera got around to the batter, the pitch had already been caught, thrown back to the pitcher, and the batter was kind of warming up, getting ready to take his next pitch. So you get this really bizarre sort of time warp going on in looking at this image. As we said, we wanted to show baseball throughout culture and society, and what we found even well before the League of Their Own images that Susan showed you before was that women were playing this game and enjoying the game well before, rather comically on the left, but really very seriously on the right. Myrtle Rowe, we were very pleased to learn, was not just a decorative image here. She was signed to play for several seasons when this picture was taken on a semi-pro team outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and she hit well above average for the other players in the league at the time. Yeah, men's league. She was in the men's league. This is an image showing the United States playing Sweden in the Summer Olympics in 1912, and it was a demonstration sport at the time. I don't know, we may have to rehash that now that baseball has been rescinded from the Olympic Games. But at the time, Sweden was just learning the game. They had only been playing for about 3 years. They had to borrow a pitcher and catcher from the United States team even to perform the game. And this came from the actual International Olympic Committee report on those games, and they noted that the Swedes were very impressed with the breaking balls of the American pitchers. They had never seen a breaking pitch before. Scenes you would still see today, hot dog vendors outside the stadium. I think the only thing different you would notice today is the dress. We're a little more informal today. Children playing in Griffith Stadium. This comes from a collection of this is the National Photo Company collection, which is a baseball press service that operated here in Washington, D.C. area. And they were very good at documenting the local team, the Senators, and their world championship. But they also had a lot of setup and fun shots, including these children. Baseball was played everywhere. Here's a mother-daughter game in 1935. Another gem of game action. This is Bob Feller pitching to Joe DiMaggio. This is a wonderful perspective because you can see the scoreboard and what people were experiencing in the stadium at the time. That same view, as Washington National fans might know, is a very, very large video display. This is just a beautiful shot of a sliding scene. Presumably the third baseman is receiving the ball and going to unsuccessfully tag out this runner. Baseball in society. Hot dogs, beer, on the back deck watching the World Series. This sequence of ballparks, this is a set we put together for this presentation you won't find in the book. You'll really note how, as we go chronologically through the years here, how the setup may have changed, and no matter where you were, you'll see some familiar images. So again, we're still in the mid-19th century, and you've already got your diamond, but not necessarily an outfield yet. Again, we've got the diamond. Some grandstands are starting to show up. This is in California in 1890. This was a professional league at the time, the California Leagues. The top image shows the Polo Grounds in New York, and what might be hard to see on the screen is the outfield is actually by and large formed by a rope and a crowd of spectators lining the outside. So hitting a home run doesn't necessarily mean clearing the fence at the time. You're hitting it beyond the row of fans who are standing out there watching the game. But by the bottom image, we're starting to get advertising in. And so we've got some fences built selling you shirts and tobacco products, probably. And a later view of the World Series still at the Polo Grounds, even further grown up, and Coogan's Bluff in the background. Anchorage, Alaska, very early. Not a lot of people were in Alaska at the time, but they certainly showed up for this game. Almost all the buildings in the background are all these canvas tent structures. (1922), Woodstock, Virginia. Very nice, clean field. And the World Series here in Griffith Stadium in D.C. in 1933. Alas, New York won. Night baseball. Some of the earliest night field vision shots we have are in the collection. And it's impressive that this was exposed so well, even though with all the glare of the glow of the lights, you can still see the players and the fans fairly well in this scene. And here's the Houston Astrodome, no longer used for baseball and other events. But a nice shot of how the lighting system really worked there. It really came through in the ceiling. This is a very recent collection, and a collection we're still acquiring. A photographer where we work with named Carol Highsmith documents America and donates all of her work to the Library of Congress. She made this shot of Camden Yards even before the entire construction of the outside of the stadium was done. So it's a very beautiful image of a very clean lawn there. But it's really the setting, much like you saw in the Polo Grounds images of the stadium being the centerpiece of a city. That really worked well for Baltimore. So as a game that is played everywhere, sometimes you have to make do with the situation you are in. We're at the beach today. Well, so be it. Let's play baseball in the water. All you have is an alley. That's okay. This is a shot by Ansel Adams of the Manzanar relocation camp in California. An empty lot in New York City and Harlem. Ice, no problem. Let's play. Here's some team photos. This is a remarkable image for a number of reasons. This is the team that played on the USS Maine about a year before it was exploded in the harbor in Havana, Cuba. The one gentleman who is labeled in the top left, J.H. Bloomer, he's the only survivor of this team from that explosion. Here's the college ball team from Atlanta. This was exhibited in the Paris Exposition in 1900. The Harvard team. And here's the indoor baseball team. Essentially, they were really playing softball. You'll see the guy in the front row there is holding what's a very large ball. But it was, in a sense, a predecessor or companion to the softball games that we play today. This is the ball team. These are glass factory workers in Indiana. The photo is by Lewis Hine, and it's part of a series that was made for the National Child Labor Commission. And it was a very serious subject in that he was trying to document child labor practices in the United States at the time. But if you look at the image, it's really whimsical in many ways. This is a very intimidating group that you might want to play against. If the rifle doesn't scare you, perhaps the fact that young boys are smoking pipes might scare you. Or maybe, they're glass factory workers, but several of them are barefoot. Baseball in Hawaii, 1910. Here's two more panoramas, and at the top image, as I noted before about panoramas, there's scenes that are shot from left to right, and this one is very well demonstrated, although maybe not clear on the screen. The team shot shows the exact same player on the very left side of the image and the right side of the image. His name was Germany Schaefer, as was his nickname, and he was very much a class clown on the team. So when the left side of the shot was made, he was standing there, and then as the camera panned across, he ran around the camera all the way to the other side and posed again, and he's grinning rather humorously. And the bottom image is a wonderful treasure. It's the first Negro League World Series that was played in Kansas City, Missouri, with a very full crowd in attendance. It's a beautiful shot. Here's some postcards we recently added to our collection. Boston Bloomers were women's teams that barnstormed across the country, but they were not above getting ringers in every so often. And they got quite a good one for the Boston team in Smokey Joe Wood. And perhaps he's the less handsome-looking player on the team in the front row in the top image. Some of the players would actually dress up in full drag to try and carry off the stunt. And then they later abandoned that trickery. And here's another shot of the Rockford Peaches from the Girls Professional League. And a predecessor to them. In 1913, this is from the George Bain collection, and this shows the female Giants. Other images from this series show them scrimmaging against the real New York Giants team. Lots of shots of Babe Ruth, and this is a nice series because you see a lot of pictures of him in very typical settings, and if you've seen video of him doing his typical home run trot, and it was nice to see different views, and part of what I enjoy about the richness of these collections is you see things you might not have seen otherwise. As a star of the day, not just as an athlete, but in public, they captured a lot of images of him not just playing baseball, but out in society, going to the theater. You saw him in the movies, and here he is working in a cigar factory, rolling his own, and showing up for duty for his National Guard service. We've shown this in several venues before, but it's such a wonderful image. Babe Ruth is lying on the ground. He had hit that cement wall trying to chase a foul ball, and he was knocked out for nearly 5 minutes. And apparently, as the story goes, he recovered, insisted to not come out of the game, finished that game, and then went on to play the second game of the doubleheader. But you can see how close the crowd was able to get in on the scene. You've got the soda pop vendor helping out, all looking concerned. But it's really, as a journalism image, it's really just wonderful to show what was happening at that particular day's events. And this from that National Photo Company collection, so they were at Griffith Stadium quite often. This one I want to talk about for a minute because it demonstrates for me a lot of the value of why we present these collections and make them available for folks, and how far you can go in digging through the collection to learn stories about them. This is also from the National Photo Company, and the original caption simply said Blugey, Washington, and Ruth, New York. And that's it. That's all we had. But baseball fans are some of the most enthusiastic of fans of any nature in the world. And one in particular, Doug Further, he is a fan of baseball sliding images. We have seen many reproductions of this gentleman ordering images of baseball players sliding into base. And it's not just that, he likes to tell the story behind it. So the person who told us about this image was sportscaster George Michael. He passed away recently last year, a very enthusiastic man, and goes to great ends to tell you stories about this image. So he was able to determine that, well, yes, we're in Griffith Stadium, and because of the nature of the crowd and the advertisements that are hanging in the background, and when New York was in town to play Washington and all the various situations in which Babe Ruth might have been sliding to third base, he was able to determine the exact inning, situation, play in which Babe Ruth was sliding into home. All of this based on our just starting off with Blugey, Ruth. Jackie Mitchell is shown here at the end of the spring training season in 1931. some of the teams were barnstorming through Chattanooga, Tennessee, and she pitched to Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, and I can't remember the third, Tony Lazzeri. Well, first she struck out Babe Ruth, and then she struck out Lou Gehrig. Lazzeri managed to walk, and I guess the boys had had enough by then because they pulled her out of the game. Perhaps had been embarrassed enough, but they were good sports by the time the promo shot got made. This is a nice comparison of Ruth coming into the stadium on opening day, rather early in his career, especially as a Yankee in 1923, and then on Babe Ruth Day at the end of his career, 25 years later. Rich source of baseball comes from our Farm Security Administration and Office of War Information Collections. These were another set of great examples of baseball being played everywhere by everyone. So here's this is a resettlement camp in Oregon, out in the middle of nowhere. A local team in North Carolina. And children playing at a homestead school in West Virginia. The image to the right literally shows that bat bending. You can really sense that he's swinging hard. And here's a U.S. Marine Corps team that is integrated. The original caption, I guess, noted that this was a Negro team, but they were actually an integrated team because they were hoping that they would be taken more seriously and that they really wanted to forward the idea of integration within this team. And some of these might be you guys this summer on your softball teams. The Veterans History Project, the American Folklife Center, has been gathering life histories and stories and photographs and letters from military veterans, and they've shared a lot of images, and we found some baseball images from some of them. This contributor is the man at the plate in this case, in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. In New Guinea, Tuskegee Warhawks, Tuskegee, Alabama. The donor of this image is the gentleman in uniform, third from the right, I believe. And U.S. forces in occupied Germany near the end of the war. The Look collection. Look magazine was one of the magazines like Life that was showing American culture pictorially week to week. It's really one of the most untapped resources, I believe, of baseball images in the collection. We've got nearly 5 million photographs in this collection. They've been processed to the level that you can look them up by job or job assignment with each photographer, but within each of those assignments there's a great richness to these photographs. And they were taken, not necessarily, you won't necessarily find game footage, but you'll find a lot of behind-the-scenes work. They came to do human interest stories, so you'll see a lot of locker room scenes and warm-up scenes, and they really got close to the players. This is a wonderful portrait of Satchel Paige. And a locker room scene, they're just relaxing there. We serve many of these collections in the form that we received them. As the photographers produced their work, they would immediately print up contact sheets so that they could make selections. And this was a wonderful series. Ted Williams was known for his also very sweet swing, and it really even comes across in this contact sheet as well. You get a sense of how pure his stroke was in this series. And Hank Aaron checking out the standings, I believe. Roberto Clemente again. Koufax. He almost looks relaxed there in that pitch, but very focused. It's a beautiful image. And Willie Mays again. And one Marischal. Mickey Mantle. And game over. Although we let off with this image, we hope you had the enthusiasm that these ladies had on their day out at the park. Thank Thanks very much. I guess we do have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any for any of us. Yeah.
Answer me a couple of factual questions. I noticed in the ballpark section that as you went through the years, the foul ground seemed to get smaller and smaller. It seemed like in the early years, the pitchers and catchers had a tremendous amount of acreage to work with, and I just wondered if that's a coincidence. And also in the New York version of the game, I couldn't quite make it out in the light, but I think it said the distance from the rubber to the plate was 18 yards. And I wondered when they got to 60 and a half feet. And finally, I wondered when managers started wearing uniforms, because you mentioned Connie Mack, and I always pictured him in his suit, standing in the dugout. When did they start wearing the playground stuff?
If Frank can answer any of those questions factually, I can give you one observation. I noticed your question about the foul grounds. I noticed a great deal of variability about that and it seemed to be really situational. In other words, based on the land that was available, or they may have repurposed some of the parks and stadiums that they were working with, and it seemed to be, in an odd sense, dependent upon that. While Frank's coming up, I'm going to flip back to your question about the New York ball game image.
Yeah, the question that I'm going to answer is the one about the managers wearing uniforms and when that happened or didn't happen. In fact, Connie Mack did his own thing, basically. Managers were wearing uniforms from the turn of the century, but Mack just went his own way, and there was no commissioner, even Judge Landis, that was going to tell him what to do because he was the grand old man, of course. And as far as the pitching distance goes, the question was when was that expanded? I think it was in the late 1860s that the distances started to change, and the precise time, I'm just not sure, and I don't want to guess about that because somebody's going to correct me, and I don't want to hear the correction. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
The poster of the Civil War camp, what was the background of the poster? Who made it? Why was it made?
Right. You want to take that?
Okay, the poster was drawn from nature by Otto Betticher. He was a German who had come to this country and got all caught up in being an American to the point that he joined the Union Army and was taken prisoner. He was enlisted in the 68th New York Volunteers at the age of 45, and he was captured in 1862 and wound up in Salisbury, North Carolina, where there was a prison camp. And later that year, in 1862, he was exchanged for a Confederate captain. And so his view is taken from life. It's a little idealized, but he was there. He was an eyewitness. And that's about all I know, all I can tell you about that, but it's something. Yeah, it was printed in New York, 1863.
There's a recent baseball card that was sold that was of the 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings.
Right.
Is there any chance that we will get that here?
Boy, it would be great. No, it was actually a trade card. That was the first baseball card of a professional team, because the Cincinnati team was the first all-salaried team that toured in 1869. The first card is actually the one that, the one that we showed from 4 years earlier. That's a series of trade cards that came out in 1869 and in 1870. Be great if the Library of Congress, if anyone's seen this, that has them, if some of them ended up here, but they're not as of yet.
The Library of Congress ever get an exhibition of some of these memorabilia or thought about?
Great question.
Has the Library of Congress ever had an exhibition? Yes, it did. About 15 years ago, I think, there was a big display on the music sheets, And this past fall, we had, as part of a Library of Congress baseball symposium, we had a lot of these images here that you see. We had the original artifacts out on display for a couple of days. There is now talk, because of the success of the book, of doing a larger exhibit in the future, and that would be terrific. Okay, well, we've got copies of the books back at the back of the room. If you would like to get a copy, we'd be happy to sign it. We're also featured in this month's Library of Congress Information Bulletin, and there are a stack of those as well back there if you want to read a little bit more about the symposium and some of the other things that we've been doing at the library with the baseball collections. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.